Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to AITA Chronicles, where Reddit drama gets real. And today, buckle in, because every single story in this episode goes from zero to nuclear in record time. We've got a brother no one wants to take in, a wedding guest who got kicked out mid-reception, a dad drawing the line between privacy and party guests, and a girlfriend who wants to turn her twins into a personal brand. Oh, and let's not forget the mom who demands her teenage son make 4 school lunches, then punishes him for saying no. You'll hear stories that make you say, wait, how did we get from meal prep to full-on family warfare? Or, why is grandpa arguing with a child over a stuffed animal? And by the time we get to the coworker who got reported just for commenting on a ring, let's just say, you'll be glad this isn't your office. These are the kind of AITA posts that start out small but spiral into family explosions, relationship deal breakers, and social landmines. You'll laugh, cringe, and maybe scream internally once or twice. So whether you're cooking, doom scrolling, or hiding from your own family group chat, grab your headphones, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers, and every single click helps us grow this chaotic little corner of Reddit. Now let's get into the first story, because this one kicks things off with a brother, a boundary, and one very fed up dad. Am I the asshole for refusing to take in my disabled brother? This isn't your typical family dispute. This isn't some petty argument over who said what at dinner. No, this is a lifetime of bitterness, burden, and one brother being expected to clean up a mess he didn't make. The writer opens with a sigh. You can feel it between the lines. The weight of family dysfunction, years in the making, simmering just below the surface. This story doesn't come out of nowhere. It's been waiting. And now, it's here. Let's go back to where it all really began. The writer became a single father at 21. No partner in sight. Just him and his baby daughter, Cece. The child's mother? Gone. Off chasing a socialite life, as the writer puts it, opting out of parenthood like it was a dinner reservation she'd changed her mind about. So the writer, still barely an adult himself, packs up his pride and moves back in with his mother and younger brother, referred to here as GB. Already, the odds are stacked. He's working overnight warehouse shifts, probably running on fumes and determination. He's really trying, to be the kind of father his daughter deserves. But he's not met with open arms. He's met with indifference and negligence. The mom? She's only helpful when it doesn't interfere with her evening drink. And Jeep? He's the kind of golden child that somehow gets praised for existing while doing absolutely nothing useful. Then we get to that moment, the one that burns itself into a parent's memory forever. Cece is 8 months old. The writer's stuck in traffic after a night shift, exhausted, probably anxious to get home. He calls ahead, says the baby probably needs to be fed. No answer. He finally walks through the door, 2 hours late, and hears Cece crying in their room. Not just fussy, not just tired, crying. Sitting on the couch, utterly unmoved. And what does he say? And about damn time, she's been crying. No guilt, no shame, just entitlement. The writer rushes to his baby. She's got a soiled diaper. She's hungry. She's been crying for an hour. And GB? He couldn't even be bothered to check. Now pause. Picture being a young father, doing it all alone, and realizing the people who are supposed to be your support system are treating your baby like a background noise they're too lazy to turn off. That changes you. After years of this, years of watching both his mother and GB fail his daughter, the writer finally gets a lifeline, a call from his father and stepmother. They offer help, a way out, a path forward, and he takes it. He packs up his entire life, throws it in a car, and drives 100 miles away with a toddler and no backup plan. Phone turned off to block out the noise of his mother's guilt-laden texts. That was the turning point. And you can feel the resolve set in right there. Fast forward. The writer rebuilds. He finds love again, a woman who doesn't just tolerate Cece, she embraces her, marries her, adopts her. They raise another child together, a son, and build a new life, far from the emotional landmine of his hometown. They visit, sure, holidays, quick stops on road trips, but they never stay. And the reason why? It never changes. GB. Let's talk about GB now. He's 36, still living at home. He's on disability, legitimately, from seizures, we're told. But the writer makes something crystal clear. He is not autistic, not developmentally challenged, not neurodivergent. He's just lazy and entitled and completely insulated by a mother who's made excuse after excuse for decades. He doesn't work, he doesn't clean, he barely bathes, and somehow he believes he's the cool uncle. He's not. He's the kind of uncle who offers a 12-year-old girl cigarettes and alcohol because kids your age are going to do it anyway. He's the kind of uncle who talks to his niece about his romantic life in detail, despite the fact that his last relationship was over 17 years ago. He makes her uncomfortable, visibly, repeatedly. She tells her father this. The writer listens and believes her. This isn't just family dysfunction. This is a boundary, loud and clear. And then comes the ask. The writer's mother calls. It's another guilt trip. We miss you. We wish we could have seen you. Standard lines. Then she drops the real reason for the call. She's updated her will. She's splitting her assets between the writer and GB. And if anything ever happens to her, she wants the writer to take GB in. Take him in. The same man-child who ignored a crying baby. The same one who made a child feel unsafe in her own family. The one who smells like BO and cat pee and sees no issue with it. The writer's response? Not a snowflake's chance in hell is he ever living with us. And let's be honest, how else should he have responded? The mother tries to justify it. Cece's going off to college soon. There'll be space. He can't take care of himself, but none of that matters, not to the writer, because GB's needs aren't the only needs that matter here. What about Cece? What about the little girl who had to endure uncomfortable conversations at 12? The girl who grew up watching her father choose her safety over tradition? The writer hits back with the truth. You're describing someone who needs assisted living, not a room in a house with people unqualified to provide the assistance he clearly needs. And the knockout punch. I'm not making my kids spend time around anyone that makes them feel uncomfortable, family or not. That's not cruelty, that's protection. So let's circle back. Is the writer the asshole for refusing to take in his disabled brother? Absolutely not. This isn't about being cold-hearted. This isn't about turning your back on family. This is about being a protector, a father, a man who's already done the impossible to give his kids a better life. What kind of father would he be if he welcomed danger back into his home just to appease a woman who never protected him? The answer is simple. He's not the asshole. He's just done letting people walk all over him and his children. And if that makes someone uncomfortable, then maybe it's time they start taking care of their own mess for once in their lives. Update. Am I the asshole for refusing to do something special on my wedding day for my sister because she refused to do something for me at hers? You know what's wild? Weddings are supposed to be about love, joy, and starting a new chapter. But somehow family drama has a way of crashing the party like an uninvited storm cloud. The writer, who's just trying to get through her special day, ends up navigating a minefield of old grudges, unhealed wounds, and a sister who just couldn't help herself. Let's rewind just a little. The writer's story began when her sister Jessica shut her down 2 years ago at her own wedding. And I mean, cold. The writer had just gone through a brutal breakup. Her ex had left her for someone else right before what she thought was going to be a proposal. So, understandably, she was crushed, clinging to whatever scraps of hope she could gather at the time. All she wanted was to hold her sister's wedding bouquet for a few seconds, snap a quick selfie, a personal moment of hope, maybe even healing. Jessica? She flat out refused, said she didn't want to damage the bouquet. Not even a quick photo, no empathy, no gesture. Just denial. It's the writer's turn to walk down the aisle. And here comes Jessica again. This time, she wants something. She wants to announce her pregnancy during the writer's wedding. Now imagine that. The very sister who couldn't spare a bouquet 2 years ago wants the spotlight on your wedding day to make your moment about her. It's bold, it's tone deaf, it's classic main character syndrome. The writer said no, absolutely not. And honestly, who could blame her? But here's the part that really gets under your skin. After that clear boundary was set, after the writer made it explicit that no announcements were to be made, Jessica and their mother did it anyway. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a choice. The wedding was simple, intimate, just family and a few close friends. The moment was pure, until Jessica opened her mouth and said, "I have something to share." The writer didn't even let her finish. She shut it down with a sharp, "No, you don't." You could cut the tension with a knife. Guests didn't know what was happening, but the message was loud and clear to Jessica. And yet, the audacity didn't stop there. Their mother, the writer's own mother, handed a gift to Jessica and said, "The new mom also deserves some recognition." At that point, it stopped being a misstep. That was sabotage. On purpose, in public. Jessica starts crying, those joyful pregnancy announcement tears, tries to hug the bride, the woman whose moment she just stomped all over, and the writer, she steps aside. No yelling, no breakdown, just cold, clear consequence. She told them the celebration was over. For them. And they left, because finally, the stepdad and the brother-in-law realized this wasn't some sibling squabble, it was betrayal. And since that day, the writer hasn't responded to a single call, not a single message. She is done. This wasn't just about a bouquet or a wedding announcement. This was about respect, about how some people expect forgiveness while offering none, about how family can sometimes be the first to minimize your pain and maximize their needs. And the truth, the writer showed more grace than most would have. She gave them a chance. She drew the boundary. She warned them. They chose to ignore it. So, am I the asshole? If standing up for yourself on your wedding day makes you an asshole, then maybe the definition needs rewriting. But you're not, and everyone watching this knows it. You were the bride, and for once, just once, you put yourself first. And honestly, that's not selfish. That's survival. Am I the asshole for not letting my girlfriend turn our twins into content and thinking about ending the relationship over it? There's a quiet kind of heroism in the people who show up every single day. For the diapers, the early school runs, the sniffles at 3 a.m., and the countless small thankless tasks that make up parenting. The writer? He's one of those people. He became a dad at 17. Let that sink in for a second. 17. Most kids at that age are trying to scrape together enough change for gas money, not raise twins. But he stepped up. Not just once, not just when it was convenient, but day in, day out, for 7 years straight. And now, the life he's worked so hard to build, the stability, the love, the normalcy, is starting to crack under a new pressure, one that didn't exist when he first became a father, one that's been creeping into more and more homes, more and more lives, content culture. His girlfriend, the mother of those twins, has caught the bug. You know the one. The carefully curated, color-corrected life of the Instagram mom. At first, it was cute. A few photos, matching outfits, maybe a reel here and there. Innocent enough. But that wasn't the end goal. Not for her. She started talking about building a brand, sponsorships, monetizing their adorable twins, turning moments into markets, childhood into currency. And here's where the writer drew the line. Not with anger, not with controlling behavior, but with clarity. He said no. Because to him, these aren't just cute pictures. They're not potential paychecks. They're his kids. His real, breathing, innocent children who don't yet understand what it means to have strangers peering into their lives, commenting on their clothes, their smiles, their every move. And frankly, that's not paranoia, that's parenting. He told her how important it was to give the twins a real childhood, one that isn't filtered, edited, and posted for engagement. One where they can just be kids. Free from algorithms, free from pressure, free from strangers knowing their names. But she didn't see it that way. She called him controlling, accused him of limiting opportunities, said he didn't understand how the world works now. And there it is, the moment where things break. When you realize the person you built this life with, they might be seeing your kids more as a product than as people. That's a gut punch no one prepares you for. And now the writer, who's poured every bit of himself into this family, is standing at a painful crossroads. He's seriously considering walking away. Not because he doesn't love her, but because he refuses to compromise on the thing that matters more to him than anything, protecting his children. You can hear the frustration between the lines when he says, I didn't become a dad at 17 to raise kids who grow up on ring lights and comment sections. That's not overreaction. That's a man staring down a tidal wave of internet pressure and saying, not my kids. Not like this. And let's not forget, he's not against tech. He plays games with them, watches movies. He's not a Luddite hiding them from the world. But there's a massive difference between letting your kids use technology and turning them into it. Now, some so-called friends are telling him he's throwing away an opportunity to secure their future. But here's the real question. What future are we really talking about? Is it one where the twins grow up knowing their every birthday party was public, where a tantrum becomes relatable content, where likes and shares dictate their worth? Or is it a future where they get to grow up quietly, safely, privately, guided by a father who never once saw them as a brand? Because that's what the writer's fighting for. So, am I the asshole? Let's be honest. No, not even close. He's the kind of dad this generation needs more of. One who sees past the views, past the likes, and into the long game. The one where his kids still have their dignity and privacy intact. And if that means ending a relationship with someone who can't or won't respect those boundaries, then maybe that's the most loving, painful, and right decision of all. Am I the asshole for renting an apartment without telling my parents, even though they depend on me emotionally? Sometimes choosing yourself feels like betrayal. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the people who depend on your exhaustion have convinced you that your survival comes second to their comfort. And when you finally take a breath for you, they call it abandonment. They admit, this is the storm the writer, a 24-year-old woman, is standing in. She didn't move across the country. She didn't run away. She didn't vanish without a word. She rented an apartment 6 minutes from her parents' home. That's it. A quiet, nearby space where she could breathe, think, sleep, and maybe finally begin to heal. But now her parents say she betrayed them. Let's take a step back. The writer has a full-time job as a civil servant in IT, and no, contrary to popular belief, it's not some laid-back desk job with hours of scrolling and chill. It's demanding. Add to that the weight of finishing college, managing adult responsibilities, and carrying the emotional fragility of an entire household. It's not just overwhelming, it's inhuman. Then came the wake-up call, the kind no one can ignore. The writer got test results from her doctor. Her stress system had collapsed completely. The diagnosis wasn't just you need to relax. It was a red flashing warning. If you keep living like this, your body will start breaking down. Her doctor didn't sugarcoat it. She told her that by 25, she could start experiencing early menopause symptoms. 25. That's not adulthood. That's barely the beginning. And where does this stress come from? It comes from home, a place that's supposed to be safe, nurturing, and restorative, but instead is a war zone of control, emotional chaos, and relentless tension. There are daily fights, no peace, no privacy, not even the simple freedom to use a computer or speak to a friend. Everything, screens, lights, connections to the outside world, must be off by 9 or 10 p.m. Her family watches her screen, monitors her every move. And when they discovered she had an American friend, it wasn't just concern, it turned into control, surveillance, paranoia. This isn't just about strict parents. This is about emotional suffocation. And on top of it all, Ryder is the emotional anchor during her mother's nighttime seizures. Her dad panics, her sister collapses into tears. But Ryder, she stays calm. She's the one who responds, steadies, takes action. It's a terrifying burden, one most people would never be able to shoulder. But she does, because she knows they depend on her. And still, she's drowning. And here's where the tragedy deepens. Despite everything, despite the monitoring, the sleepless nights, the silence, the emotional blackmail, she didn't run far. She didn't abandon them. She didn't cut contact. She found an apartment 6 minutes away. She chose to stay close, chose to remain accessible, chose to still be nearby in case they needed her. But when she told them, they exploded, they cried, they yelled, they called her ungrateful. They said she was a traitor for trying to protect her health, for needing a space of her own, for making a deeply personal decision with her own money, for her own body and her own survival. They said if she truly cared, she would have asked for permission first. But here's the thing. Why do you need permission to save yourself? Why does self-preservation require a group vote? This isn't about disrespect. This isn't about rebellion. It's about being backed into a corner, about finally realizing that love shouldn't feel like a prison. It's about learning that you can't pour from an empty cup, and hers has been bone dry for far too long. And their response, it wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't sadness. It was punishment. They threatened to cut her off, turn the extended family against her, even involve her elderly grandparents, who may not have much time left, using guilt like a weapon. And now, the writer is left second-guessing everything, wondering if she moved too fast, if she should have involved them in the decision, if trying to save herself somehow made her cruel. But let's ask the hard question. Would they have ever let her leave if she had asked? Would they have supported the decision if it meant losing control over her, if it meant confronting the reality that she's not a child anymore and they're not entitled to her sacrifice? The answer is clear, because to them, her value was tied to her proximity, her usefulness, her silence, her compliance. Is the writer the asshole? No. She's someone who finally said, enough. Enough nights waking up in panic. Enough giving up her personal freedom. Enough putting everyone else's needs above her own. Enough being the calm in everyone else's storm while drowning in her own. She didn't abandon them. She just chose herself, and for people who've only loved her for what she could do rather than who she is, that feels like betrayal. But it's not. It's called healing, and maybe now, for the first time in a long time, she can finally breathe. Am I the asshole for enforcing basic boundaries on my daughter's sleepover? Sometimes being a parent feels like walking a tightrope, balancing between protecting your children and giving them space, between being the cool parent and the responsible one. And sometimes that line is crossed so quietly, so casually, that when you look back, you wonder how things went so wrong. The writer is a 42-year-old father, someone who isn't new to parenting. He has 2 kids living under his roof. Anya, his 17-year-old daughter, full of life and friends and a buzzing social circle, and Noah, his 14-year-old stepson, a more quiet and internal soul who's been through more pain than most adults have. Noah lost his mother a few years ago. Let that settle in. Imagine carrying that weight through middle school into your teenage years while trying to figure out who you even are. He's not broken, but he's been bruised by life. And with that kind of emotional terrain, he's developed his own boundaries, not out of rudeness or coldness, but survival. He values his space, and when that space is violated, he doesn't lash out. He shuts down. And the writer, he gets it. He sees Noah. He respects that. So when Anya, his daughter, asked to have a sleepover, a harmless, fun request from a teenager, he said yes. Of course he did. But he wasn't blind to what could go wrong. He knew her friends, loud, high energy, sometimes overwhelming. All he asked was 2 simple things. 2, 1, don't go into Noah's room. 2, keep the volume down after 11. Not unreasonable, not controlling. Just boundaries, a way to let both kids exist in the same house without one being trampled by the other. But what happened next? It wasn't just a broken rule, it was something deeper. At around 10 p.m., an hour before the agreed quiet time, the writer went upstairs. Not because he expected trouble, but just to peek in. A parent's instinct, a check-in. And what he found? An absolute breach of trust. The girls were in Noah's room, not by accident. They were comfortable. They had been there. 2 were on his bed. One of them was flipping through his sketchbook, his private artwork, the kind of personal expression that often says more than words ever could. Another was poking around in his things, and they were all giggling. Not the harmless kind of giggle, the uncomfortable kind, the mocking kind. And Noah? He was frozen. He was frozen. Not yelling, not protesting, just sitting there, silent. The writer tried to speak to him, to check in, but Noah didn't respond. That's how far gone he was. And the thing is, if you've ever known a child who shuts down when overwhelmed, then you know that silence, that's not peace, that's pain with no words. At that moment, the writer didn't hesitate. He told the girls to get out, now. And he meant it, not in an angry, raging outburst, but in a firm, no negotiation kind of way. Because when someone you love is being disrespected in their own space, you don't ask questions, you act. Then he did what many parents wouldn't. He followed through. He called every single one of those girls' parents and had them sent home. And when Anya blew up, furious, embarrassed, he didn't escalate. He simply told her, "We'll talk in the morning." That night, the writer sat with Noah, quietly, just being there, offering the only thing Noah needed in that moment: presence, stability, safety. Eventually, Noah asked for time alone, and the writer respected that too. But now here he is, late at night, the adrenaline faded, alone with his thoughts. Both kids in bed, the house quiet, and he's stuck wondering, was I too harsh? Did I overstep? Am I the asshole for enforcing those boundaries? Let's be honest here. What kind of lesson would it teach if he didn't act? That Noah's space doesn't matter? That boys should tough it out when they're uncomfortable, even when they're literally crying in their own bedroom? That girls having fun takes priority over basic decency? This wasn't about rules. It was about respect. Respect for privacy. Respect for trauma. Respect for a kid who's been through enough, who asks for very little but deserves to feel safe in his own home. And as for Anya, yes, she was embarrassed, but here's the truth. Embarrassment is a fleeting emotion. A father failing to protect his child? That's something that echoes. So no, the writer is not the asshole. He's a father who made the hard call. He stood up when it mattered, protected the kid who couldn't speak up for himself, and took the hit from his daughter, knowing full well that she might not understand now, but one day, maybe, she will. Am I the asshole for returning my nephew's birthday present after he destroyed my property and his parents refused to pay for the damages? There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slow. Right beneath the surface of anger, underneath the shock, is heartbreak. This story begins with the writer, a 19-year-old college student. Young, but not naive. Tired, but determined. She's someone who knows the value of hard work because nothing was handed to her. Everything she has, she fought for. Her car, her upgrades, every dollar in her bank account. Working overtime shifts while juggling college life isn't glamorous, but it's real. It's her reality. And until recently, it was finally starting to pay off. But just when life starts to feel like it's coming together, something always has to break. Tomorrow was supposed to be a special day. Her nephew's birthday party. He's 9, still a kid, but old enough to know better. The writer had been planning to show up in a big way, not with some throwaway toy, but with something he truly wanted, a brand new computer. A gift not just bought, but earned, with her own hard work and even a little help from her fiancé. But what happened just 24 hours before that party? That changed everything. The writer's sister, the boy's mother, had brought him over. This wasn't new, but it's important to understand the dynamic here. This sister doesn't parent. She doesn't discipline. She doesn't believe in the word no. Her son, the writer admits, is loved but also spoiled, enabled, given a free pass for behaviors that should have been nipped in the bud long ago. Still, the writer tried to let it go, tried to focus on the birthday, on being the bigger person, but even the most patient people eventually run out of grace. It was supposed to be a normal moment, just a step inside to thaw out some chicken. Her sister was outside, allegedly watching the boy. It seemed safe, seemed fine. And then, crack, a sound that makes your stomach drop before your brain even catches up. The writer rushed outside to find her windshield shattered. Not a crack, not a chip, shattered. And lying inside her car among the shards of broken glass, a rock, a huge one. Thrown, intentionally, by her 9-year-old nephew. Let that sit for a moment. This wasn't some toddler who didn't know better. This was a kid old enough to know exactly what he was doing. And she had it all on camera, security footage and dash cam. There was no question who did it. Shaking with disbelief and rage, the writer confronted her sister. And that's when the real betrayal happened. She asked her sister, "Why weren't you supervising him?" And the sister, she shrugged it off. Blamed the writer. Said she should have been outside guarding her car if it was so important. Imagine that. You work yourself to exhaustion for years. Finally get something of your own, and your own family tells you it's your fault when their kid breaks it. No apology, no offer to help pay, no guilt, just entitlement. Her fiancé stepped in and told them to leave, which they did. But that wasn't the end. Far from it. Later that day, the writer walked into the store where she'd bought the computer, the one meant for her nephew, and she returned it. Not out of pettiness, out of necessity, because she now had hundreds of dollars in repairs to pay for and zero support from the people responsible. That money, it wasn't sitting in a savings account collecting dust. It was real money, needed money. The refund won't even come immediately, but she did what she had to do. And still, the entitlement wasn't done. A few hours later, her sister had the audacity to text her, "Can you bring nephew's name gift to me today? I want to have all his gifts there for his birthday party tomorrow." As if nothing had happened. As if her son hadn't caused hundreds in damage. As if her complete refusal to take accountability didn't just leave the writer scrambling to undo a disaster. The response was honest, restrained, and frankly more polite than many would have managed. "I will not be bringing nephew's name gift to the party. He damaged my car, which will cost a lot of money to fix. You didn't seem to care that your son damaged property that wasn't his. I returned his gift to get the money back, to pay for damages since you won't pay for them." There it was. Clear, firm, fair. But of course, that wasn't the end either. The sister couldn't handle it, so she went crying to their parents. And now the writer? She's being screamed at by her own mother and father for making her nephew cry. Let's stop right here. Who's crying for the writer? Who's crying for the 19-year-old who broke her back for a car that's now shattered? Who's defending her right to be upset, to protect her property, to not reward destructive behavior with a brand new computer? Because let's be honest, what kind of message would it send if she gave that gift anyway? Break my stuff. I'll give you more. No, that's not love. That's enabling. And this entire situation, it isn't about a gift anymore. It's about respect, boundaries, and the painful realization that sometimes family will fail you in ways that strangers never would. Is the writer the asshole or the asshole for returning the birthday gift after her 9-year-old nephew destroyed her car and her sister refused to pay for it? Absolutely, unequivocally, no. She's not heartless. She's not petty. She's just done. And if anything, she's teaching a lesson no one else around that kid seems willing to teach. Actions have consequences. And until they learn that, there's no gift on earth that can fix what's already broken. Am I the asshole for not helping my broke friend because she got a tattoo? There's a certain kind of tired that doesn't come from working long hours. It comes from the emotional labor of trying, truly trying, to be there for someone when they're in a rough spot. When someone you care about says, "I haven't eaten today, I literally don't have food," it hits deep, because suddenly it's not about opinions or personality differences, it's about basic survival. And that's exactly where the writer found themselves. Heart open, empathy forward, wanting to help. The writer knows what it means to struggle. They've lived that reality. Not in some abstract way, but in the concrete, gritty, check every coin kind of way. So when their friends started talking about skipping meals, not for diet reasons, but because there was no food, the writer didn't hesitate. They had a system, a brilliant, structured, ADHD-friendly meal prep system that didn't just feed them, but kept their world spinning. Every 2 weeks, 10 portions, 3 meals, budgeted and planned with strategy and care. They didn't just buy food, they built sustainability. And at that moment, it wasn't just about their own needs. The writer looked at their freezer, 25 extra meals stacked and ready, and thought, "I can share this." Not in a casual, have a bite way. No, this was a deliberate offer. To drive over, hand off food, quietly lessen someone's hunger. That kind of gesture, it's not small. It's not just kindness, it's personal. It's saying, "You matter enough for me to change my plans." But then, just hours before the drop-off, the writer's phone lit up. Snapchat? Harmless enough, right? Except on this story, their hungry broke friend wasn't posting a cry for help. She wasn't documenting her food struggles. She was showing off a brand new tattoo. And not just any tattoo. A $180 flash piece, instantly recognizable because the writer knew the artist. Had considered getting one themselves, but held off because they couldn't justify the cost right now. Let that sink in. The person who was ready to give away food had decided against spending that money on themselves. And the person claiming to have no food spent it without hesitation. Now, this is where things twist, because empathy has its limits. When someone tells you they're starving and then flexes brand new ink online, it shakes something in you. It breaks that fragile contract of trust. So the writer did what many would, even if they wouldn't admit it. They messaged the friend. How were you able to afford a tattoo? The answer? I'm always able to scrounge up cash for new tattoos. That's when the wall goes up. Not out of cruelty, not out of resentment, but out of sheer emotional whiplash. You can't tell someone you're starving and then show them a luxury item and expect the sympathy to stay intact. That's not classism. It's just common sense. So the writer, still stunned, replied with the truth. I'm not bringing the meals anymore. If you have money for tattoos, you're clearly not that desperate. And then the storm hit. The friend snapped, called the writer a bitch, accused them of being classist, threw down the poor people are allowed nice things argument. And let's pause here because yes, of course poor people are allowed joy. They're allowed art, self-expression, tattoos, celebrations. No one is denying that. But when you say you're skipping meals, not by choice, but out of absolute need, and someone is willing to drop everything to help feed you, and then they find out you dropped nearly $200 on a tattoo, it doesn't line up. Not morally, not emotionally, not logically. This isn't about judging what people spend money on. It's about integrity, about not playing two different roles to two different audiences. You can't cry starvation one moment, then show off luxury purchases the next and expect people not to notice. The writer wasn't trying to control anyone. They weren't lecturing or punishing. They just realized if she's got enough to scrounge up for a tattoo, then she doesn't need my freezer meals. And that's okay. But the friendship, it cracked. Not because of the food, not even because of the money, but because trust relies on honesty. And once that trust is shaken, even a well-meant gesture starts to feel like a manipulation. So now the writer is sitting with this ache, wondering if they went too far, wondering if maybe they were too harsh, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they are the asshole. But here's the truth. No, writer, you're not the asshole. You were ready to give freely. You offered help based on what you were told, and when you saw the facts didn't match the story, you adjusted your offer. That's not cruelty. That's boundaries. You didn't shame her for getting a tattoo. You didn't tell her what to spend money on. You just decided not to sacrifice your time, your food, and your kindness for someone who wasn't being real with you. And if that makes someone angry, then maybe they weren't ever looking for help, just a free ride. Am I the asshole for making the woman I'm seeing cry? It always starts out small, a gesture, a moment, a conversation you think will be light, simple, maybe even sweet. But sometimes the small things, they turn into something heavy, a fracture you didn't see coming. The writer has been seeing this woman, 36 years old, for 6 months, half a year of getting to know someone, that delicate early phase where you're still learning what matters to each other, still figuring out how you both tick. Recently, the writer took a trip, not just anywhere, Japan, a place bursting with culture, beauty, and little wonders you can't find anywhere else. Naturally, he brought back gifts, thoughtful ones, not just for the woman he's seeing, but for her daughter too, a 6-year-old girl, innocent, curious, wide-eyed, the perfect age to fall in love with something new. He brought back 6 packs of Japanese chocolates, not expensive, not over the top, just thoughtful. A way of saying, I thought of you, I thought of your daughter, I wanted to share this experience. That's where this should have ended, with gratitude, with maybe a smile, a little moment of joy shared between people, but it didn't. 2 weeks after giving the gifts, the writer casually asked how her mom liked one of the smaller items. Nothing confrontational, just small talk, checking in. She said she hadn't given it to her mom yet, that it was still sitting somewhere in a bag. Forgotten. That was the first crack. But it was the next part that truly stunned him. He asked if her daughter had enjoyed the chocolates from Japan. That's when she dropped the bomb. She threw them all away. No hesitation, No apology, just flatly, she didn't know if they were out of date. Let that sink in. Imagine you bring back chocolates from across the world. You picture a little girl unwrapping one, eyes lighting up, tasting something entirely new. And then you find out it never even happened. The chocolates were tossed into the bin, unopened. Now, here's where the emotional twist hits harder than expected. She didn't throw them away because they were spoiled. She didn't even check. She just didn't trust them. Not because they looked off, but because they were foreign. That's not just odd. That's disheartening. She said she wasn't sure what to expect from chocolate that wasn't from here. She's never traveled abroad, never left her home country. And the writer, he tried to understand. He really did. But no matter how he turned it over in his mind, it felt bizarre. There was no thank you. No, it was thoughtful, but just excuses. Casual, even childish ones, like it's bedding for the mice now and they've been recycled. As if this wasn't about a real gift from a real person with real intent. Let's pause right there. This wasn't about the chocolate. Not really. This was about being dismissed. It was about making a kind gesture and having it treated like trash, literally. It was about the lack of care, the lack of consideration, the shrug that came with it. So the writer, hurt, confused, still trying to piece it together, says what many of us would in his place. If you didn't want them, fine. But at least let your daughter try them. You robbed her of that moment. When will she ever get to taste something like that again? And that's when she cried. Not when she threw away the gift, not when she dismissed his thoughtfulness, but when she was called out. She cried, accused the writer of being cruel, of ruining the evening, of being unkind. She painted herself as the victim. And in the wake of those tears, the writer was left wondering, was I too harsh? Did I overreact? Am I the asshole here? Let's talk about it. No, the writer is not the asshole. What he did was honest. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even dramatic. It was the kind of stunned, disappointed truth that comes out when you realize someone doesn't value the effort you put into something meaningful. There's something deeply frustrating about giving a thoughtful gift and watching it get discarded without a second thought. It's not about the money. It's about the connection that gift was meant to symbolize. And more than that, it's about the child. The little girl who never even got the chance to decide for herself. That's the part that hurts most. That's the part that makes you stop and go, what was the reason? Bias, mistrust, a narrow worldview that just couldn't accept something unfamiliar? It's not wrong to be taken aback by that. It's not wrong to speak up. And frankly, tears don't always mean cruelty was inflicted. Sometimes they're a defense mechanism. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's simply being confronted with a truth that's uncomfortable. The writer didn't belittle. He didn't insult. He didn't explode. He expressed hurt, plain and simple. And that's not being an asshole. That's being human. So to the writer, no, you're not the asshole for making her cry. You didn't do it intentionally. You responded to a moment that felt dismissive and hurtful. And if tears are the only way she's willing to acknowledge the weight of your words, then maybe she needed to feel that discomfort. Because at the end of the day, what you gave wasn't just chocolate, it was kindness. And it deserved to be received with the same. Am I the asshole for telling my father-in-law he can't hump the floor in my house or in my presence? Some stories leave you speechless, and not in a poetic, soul-stirring way. No, sometimes you're just stunned, truly stunned, because something so outlandish, so off-the-wall ridiculous happens that your brain can't quite file it away under normal social behavior. That's where the writer finds herself, standing in her own living room trying to process what she just witnessed. Her father-in-law, a man pushing 60, suddenly humping the floor. Not metaphorically, not joking with words, literally, physically, on the ground, grinding in front of her with direct eye contact. And somehow, she's the one being called too sensitive. Let's rewind. The writer, a 28-year-old woman, is hosting her husband's family in their home. Her baby is 7 months old. You'd think the focus would be on bonding, laughter, maybe some shared joy around the new life they've all come to celebrate. But instead, there's this bizarre moment that hijacks the night. The family was just lounging, chatting, stretching on the floor after the baby was put to sleep. Pretty wholesome. Then out of absolutely nowhere, her father-in-law, late 50s, drops into a mock sexual position and starts thrusting against the living room floor. Just like that, inches away from her, locking eyes, and here's the part that makes your skin crawl. He claimed it was for his wife. The gesture, the pelvic action, was supposedly meant to be flirtatious toward her mother-in-law, his wife of decades, yet he didn't do it toward her. He did it in front of the writer. Let that sit for a second. Her mother-in-law looked just as thrown off. The room split instantly. The children of this man, they laughed, like this was normal. Just another quirky dad antic, another entry in the he's just goofy scrapbook. The writer, she sat there, stunned, trying to make sense of what just happened. Not trying to kill the mood, not trying to scold or shame anyone, just stunned. She didn't react in the moment. She let it go. The visit ended. The in-laws left. But the image didn't. That moment stuck to her brain like glue. It wouldn't wash off. And after a few days of turning it over in her head, she finally did the mature thing. She brought it up to her husband, not to complain, not to attack, but to explain that she felt deeply uncomfortable. And the floodgates opened. Suddenly, she wasn't voicing a concern. She was ruining the fun. Suddenly, she was the problem, the one who always finds a reason to make things uncomfortable when his family visits, the one who takes things too seriously. They called it a joke, just a harmless, goofy, grandpa-level joke. Nothing more. But here's the thing, and this is where your audience will lean in because it's the real heart of the story. Intent doesn't always cancel out impact. The writer isn't some uptight, anti-fun rule maker. She's danced with her family-in-law before. She's done goofy TikTok moves in their living room, but what she's done is postable, harmless, playful. What her father-in-law did was not. You can't compare a fun group dance to one person simulating sex with the ground while making eye contact with his daughter-in-law. The absurdity writes itself, but the discomfort? That part's real. That part lingers. And that's what the writer is trying to protect. Her comfort in her own home. This isn't about moral policing. It's about boundaries. And when your boundary is crossed in your own living room and the people who love you tell you that you're the problem, it gets complicated, fast. Even worse, her father-in-law defended himself by saying he never felt uncomfortable when she was dancing around with her husband and siblings-in-law, as if that gives him permission to act however he wants, as if her comfort is subject to his perception of fairness. Let's be real. There's a difference between joining in harmless family fun and doing something sexually suggestive near your daughter-in-law. One is inclusive, the other is invasive. And the fact that her husband, her partner, got angry with her for expressing discomfort, that stings the most. Because when you marry someone, you expect that they'll have your back when something crosses the line, even if it's family, especially if it's family. But now, she's being gaslit, made to question herself, wondering if she imagined the weirdness, wondering if she overreacted, wondering if she's lost the plot, or if everyone else is just too used to letting inappropriate things slide. So here she is, preparing for another conversation, trying to arm herself with clarity, with perspective, with reality, and wondering, am I the asshole for saying my father-in-law can't hump the floor in my house, for saying it made me uncomfortable, for drawing a line? Here's the truth. No, the writer is not the asshole. She's not dramatic. She's not humorless. She's not out of touch. She's someone who was sexualized, intentionally or not, in a place that was supposed to be safe. She saw a line crossed and dared to say something, and for that she's being painted as the villain. But if a man making sexual jokes and gestures near his children and daughter-in-law is considered funny, and the only person who speaks up is told to relax, then we're gaslighting women into silence. Again, and let's be clear, drawing boundaries isn't about judgment. It's about self-respect. It's about protecting your space. It's about saying, I don't care if you didn't mean harm. This made me feel unsafe, and that matters. That's not weakness. That's strength. And if that makes her the bad guy in her husband's family, so be it. Because some things you don't laugh off. You don't brush under the rug. Some things you stand up, even if your voice shakes, and say, don't ever do that in my house again. Am I the asshole for telling my mom that her remarrying made me prefer my father as a parent to her, and it's her fault we aren't as close? This story, this story hurts. Not because someone was yelling, not because there was a dramatic betrayal, but because sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from chaos. It comes from what's missing, what should have been there, and never was. The writer is a 23-year-old woman who, like so many kids of divorce, had to grow up learning how to navigate two different worlds, two different homes, two different parents, trying to figure out who they were after the storm of a broken marriage. And at the center of all that confusion was a little girl who didn't get a choice. When the writer was just 5, her parents divorced. That's such a fragile age. An age where your entire universe is still made up of bedtime routines and holding hands in parking lots. To have that world split apart before you even fully understand it, that leaves marks. Not always visible, but deep. 2 years later, her mother remarried, a man named Dan, and Dan had a daughter named Delilah. And suddenly, just like that, this little girl had a new family, new people in her space, a new rhythm to learn. But it wasn't hers. It didn't feel natural. It felt like being placed in someone else's life. Let's be clear, Dan and Delilah weren't bad people. This wasn't about evil step-parents or mistreatment. The writer even says it outright. They were fine, just not hers. They weren't her family in the way her parents used to be. And that's something no one really asked her about. No one paused to consider what she might have lost in this transition. What space was left for her in this newly merged household? Meanwhile, her dad, he stayed single. He didn't date, he didn't bring new people into her life. He focused on her, and it shows. Every year, Thanksgiving was their thing. The first year, he accidentally burned the turkey. Most dads would have panicked. Not him. He took her out for Chinese food, and just like that, a tradition was born. One of those warm, silly, perfectly imperfect rituals that say, we're in this together. It was just the two of them, every year after that. No complications, no step anyone, no expectations. Just a father and his daughter, and maybe, just maybe, that became the safe space she clung to. Because unlike her mom, her dad didn't ask her to adjust. He didn't ask her to accept a new family or share her time or pretend everything felt normal. He just showed up. He stayed constant. The writer describes him like Charlie from Twilight. Awkward, quiet, always working, but always there. Her boyfriend even pointed it out. That silent, dependable kind of presence. The kind that doesn't ask for applause, but speaks volumes through action. And then there's her mother, who from the moment she remarried, seemed to put her new husband, Dan, at the center. Family events weren't about mother and daughter time anymore. They were about the family, about Dan and Delilah and togetherness, but not the kind of togetherness that made the writer feel seen. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? She never got her mom back, not fully, not in the one-on-one, let's go get coffee and talk about your life kind of way. It was always shared, always divided, always distant. So years pass. The bond with her dad deepens, they see each other weekly, they take photos together, they live life together. Social media tells the story for anyone paying attention. And now suddenly, her mother is hurt, asking why they aren't close, asking why her daughter never posts about her, why there are no holiday visits, why the family is noticing. And so the writer tells her the truth, that she feels closer to her father because he made her feel important, because he showed up. Because he didn't build a new family and expect her to just fall in line. And yes, she acknowledged that her mom had every right to move on and find happiness, but that choice had consequences. It changed the dynamic. It changed the relationship. Her mother didn't like that. She called it unfair, said she had the right to be happy, that she wasn't abandoning her daughter, just moving forward. But here's the painful truth the writer lays bare. You made a new family. I was expected to adjust and I didn't get a choice. That kind of honesty, it cuts deep, but it's not cruel, it's raw. It's years of unspoken sadness, years of trying to feel included and failing, years of watching her mom build a life that didn't really leave room for just them. And now at 23, the writer is simply stating what she's carried since she was 5. You never put me first. He did. That's why I'm closer to him. It's not revenge. It's not spite. It's grief. So, is the writer the asshole? Not even close. She didn't scream. She didn't blame. She didn't demand her mother undo the past. She just told the truth. And truth is uncomfortable, especially when it forces someone to confront the reality that their choices, even the ones made with good intentions, left someone they loved feeling like a background character in their own family. To the writer, you're not wrong for feeling the way you do. You're not heartless for protecting the relationship that gave you warmth when you needed it most. And you're not selfish for grieving the bond you never got to have. You're just honest. And sometimes honesty is the most loving and the most painful thing you can offer. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my friend crash at my place after he roasted my apartment in front of everyone? This one's not loud. It's not dramatic on the surface, but it's the kind of situation that quietly builds, like pressure in a room you didn't notice until you can't breathe. The writer is 26 years old. He doesn't have a luxury condo. He's not flexing marble countertops or rooftop jacuzzis. What he does have is a small one-bedroom apartment, clean, simple, earned. You can hear the pride in the way he talks about it. IKEA everything, sure, but everything in its place. A humble setup, a gaming corner that brings joy, a fake plant thriving in the corner because, hey, even plastic greenery deserves to flourish. That's not just a space. That's a home, a safe place carved out of long hours, missed weekends, probably more than one instant noodle dinner. That little apartment, it's more than four walls. It's proof that the writer built something on his own. So when he invited a few friends over, just a relaxed night of pizza and hanging out, it should have been easy, comfortable. But then there's Kyle. Kyle, 27, the kind of guy who's been couch surfing for a while. No judgment, life throws curveballs. But here's where things go sideways. Kyle walks in and immediately starts roasting the writer's apartment. Not playful teasing, not friendly ribbing, straight up disrespect, masked as jokes. Damn, bro, is this a studio or a jail cell? That's how he says hello. Everyone laughs. That nervous kind of laugh people use when they're unsure whether to cringe or go along with it. The writer brushes it off. He doesn't want to kill the vibe. Then Kyle hits again. Where's your dining table? You just eat off your lap like a raccoon? More laughs. But this time, the writer claps back. Better than eating off someone else's couch, man. Crowd goes wild. Quick wit. The kind of line that saves your pride when someone's taking cheap shots. But Kyle doesn't stop. He mocks the writer's gamer chair. He mocks the fridge. He even takes a jab at the bathroom. The bathroom, for crying out loud. Says it looks like it's been through something traumatic. At first, maybe people thought it was funny, but the joke gets stale real fast. Then it gets mean. Then it gets personal. There's something about someone walking into a space you've built with your own hands and treating it like a punchline that just stings. It's not about the decor. It's not about the square footage. It's about the effort, the hours spent making it feel like home. Then the twist hits. A few days later, Kyle texts the writer. He got kicked out of wherever he was crashing and needs a place to stay. Says he needs a couch to sleep on. The same couch he just dragged in front of a room full of people. The writer's response? Brutal, but honest. I thought my apartment was too sad for you, man. Boom. Kyle calls him petty. Mutual friends chime in, saying he should let it slide. He's going through a lot, they say. He didn't mean it, they say. But here's the question. Why should someone be allowed to disrespect your home, then expect to be welcomed into it? Let's pause and get real for a second. There's a line between jokes and disrespect. Kyle didn't just tease a friend. He embarrassed him publicly in his own space. And then without even a hint of apology, he had the nerve to ask for a favor. That's not just tone deaf. That's entitled. This isn't about holding a grudge. This is about self-respect, boundaries. Knowing that sometimes when people cross a line, they don't get to pretend it didn't happen just because they suddenly need you. If Kyle had apologized, maybe this would be different. Maybe the writer could have seen it as a moment of immaturity, laughed it off, offered the couch, and moved on. But that's not what happened. There was no apology, no moment of, hey man, I went too far, just a request, as if nothing happened. And when the writer says no, suddenly he's the problem? No, not today. So is the writer the asshole for refusing to let his friend crash on the couch after being publicly roasted in his own home? Absolutely not. The writer didn't slam the door in anger. He didn't retaliate with cruelty. He simply said, "If you don't respect my space, you don't get to stay in it." And that's not petty. That's called having a spine. Let this be a reminder. Kindness doesn't mean being a doormat. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. And friendship, it has to come with mutual respect. Kyle got too comfortable tearing someone down, and now he's uncomfortable facing the consequences. Maybe next time he'll learn, if you want a place to land, don't burn the bridge on the way in. So no, writer, you're not the asshole. You're just someone who finally stood up for your space and your dignity. Am I the asshole for wearing a ring on my left ring finger and reporting a coworker for confronting me about it? This isn't just about a ring. It's about perception, boundaries, and how easily the smallest choices, ones that seem harmless, can spark something much bigger than anyone expected. The writer is a man who, before ever stepping foot into his current workplace, bought himself a ring. Not for love, not for show, just a simple piece of jewelry, something he liked, something that felt right on his hand. He wore it on his left ring finger, not as a statement, not as a signal, but simply because he thought it looked good there. That's it. No hidden agenda, no grand message, just a man, a ring, and his preference. Now, for the first few months at this job, nobody said a word about it. The office world turned, as it always does. Meetings, deadlines, keyboards clacking, coffee brewing, life went on. But in the background, something else was simmering. There was a coworker, one who over time started getting personal. Not overtly, not enough to raise alarms at first, but just enough to notice, just enough to make the writer stay vigilant. He kept his guard up, kept his words professional, kept his tone neutral. No small talk, no shared lunches, no personal disclosures. He drew the line, and he stayed behind it. But she wanted to cross it. Eventually, something tipped her off. Somehow, she found out that the writer wasn't married, not engaged, just wearing a ring. And that's when the confrontation happened. She felt deceived. Let that sink in for a second. Deceived. As if a ring on a finger, something so personal, so subjective, was a declaration. As if he owed her truth about his private life. As if this symbol that meant nothing in a romantic sense was somehow her business. She confronted him, demanded answers, pressed him in a way that felt wrong, invasive. And for the writer, who is smaller, quieter, and already walking on alert from past experiences, this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was threatening. So he didn't entertain it. He didn't defend himself, he didn't engage, he reported her, and that's when everything exploded. She was disciplined. HR stepped in. The workplace that had been quietly tolerable suddenly felt divided. Coworkers began to murmur. He took it too far. It was just a misunderstanding. He should have handled it privately. They weren't in his shoes. They didn't feel that tension crawling up his spine when she confronted him. They didn't hear the tone as see her body language, understand the power dynamics at play when someone taller, stronger, and emotionally charged gets in your space and demands something you never offered. They only saw the surface. And on the surface, it looked simple. But this wasn't simple. This was about autonomy. This was about a man's right to exist at work without being interrogated about his personal life, about his right to wear what he wants, without it becoming an invitation. Let's ask the real question here. Why did she feel entitled to know the truth about his relationship status at all? There was no friendship, no intimacy, no trust built between them. And yet she assumed, based on nothing more than a ring, that she had been misled, that she was owed an explanation. And when she didn't get it, she made it his problem, and then she made him the villain. So, is the writer the asshole? Absolutely not. This wasn't about overreacting. This was about protecting a boundary. A boundary he didn't draw in pencil, he carved it in stone. He made it clear from the beginning that he wasn't interested in mixing personal with professional. And when that line was crossed, he did what so many people are afraid to do. He reported it early, clearly, calmly, because he's been there before. He's seen what happens when you let these moments fester. He's felt what it's like to be the one who didn't speak up, only to suffer worse later. He knew how fast discomfort could spiral into something darker: bullying, harassment, isolation. And instead of waiting until it got unbearable, he took control of the narrative. And yet, people still found a way to blame him, because it's always easier, isn't it? Easier to say he made a big deal out of nothing than to ask why someone thought they had the right to demand answers in the first place. To the writer, you didn't do anything wrong. You wore a ring, you minded your business, you kept things professional, and when someone made you feel unsafe, you went to the people whose job it is to keep the workplace safe. That's not weakness. That's not drama. That's self-preservation. And let's not ignore the subtle, uncomfortable truth. If the roles were reversed, if a female employee wore a ring and a male coworker pressured her about it, it would be a very different conversation. So no, you're not the asshole. You're someone who chose to protect himself when things crossed a line. And for what it's worth, that ring, it's still yours. Wear it wherever you damn well please. Am I the asshole for telling my stepmother I didn't agree to be her summer babysitter? This isn't just about babysitting. This is about space, boundaries, choices, and how sometimes being honest makes you the villain in someone else's version of the story, even when that honesty is the only thing keeping you sane. The writer is a 17-year-old boy, and right now, he's caught in the middle of something most people wouldn't wish on any teenager: the collision of a parent's new life and the wreckage of the one that came before it. Let's rewind for a second. A year ago, Ryder's dad decided it was time to move forward. 6 years widowed. 6 years since Ryder's mom passed away, and now Dad was ready to remarry, to start over with a new woman, a new house dynamic, and a whole new set of children from her previous relationship. But with that new chapter came an uncomfortable truth. There wasn't enough space anymore. Literally. Not enough bedrooms in the house. So Ryder, already reeling from the changes, was faced with a brutal option: share a room with significantly younger boys who weren't his siblings, or get out. And to be fair, he got out. He moved in with his grandparents. And yes, that choice upset people. But here's the part no one wants to admit. When you're 17, already dealing with loss, identity, and family upheaval, you have every right to draw a line when it comes to your personal space. Sharing a room with children, that's not just inconvenient, that's intrusive. That's a line that says, your comfort doesn't matter anymore. And Ryder refused to accept that. Naturally, Dad was not pleased. He felt disrespected, said Ryder didn't get a say since he wasn't paying the bills, told him he'd been alone long enough and deserved happiness. And here's where it starts to sting. Because no matter how noble it sounds when a parent says, I deserve love again, it often comes with an unspoken asterisk, even if it comes at the expense of what my kid needs. And Ryder saw that clearly. He wasn't part of the plan anymore. He was expected to adjust, accept, accommodate. So he said no. And that's where the fracture began. His relationship with his father suffered. His connection to his stepmother, basically non-existent. And while she stewed over the distance, he stayed firm. Because in his eyes, she married into his family, not the other way around. And that's when summer hit. That long, hot stretch of months where every parent scrambles to find childcare, camp sitters, day programs. It's chaos. And Ryder's stepmother, she had a plan. Her plan was him, a free babysitter, built in and conveniently available. Except he never agreed to that. Back in April, she mentioned it, probably assuming that, like most teens, he'd cave when pressured, or maybe she thought guilt would do the trick. But Ryder said no, flat out. And when summer arrived and reality set in, she realized he meant it. And she didn't take it well. She tried again. Dad stepped in this time. He tried appealing to sentiment. It's a great chance to bond with the kids. It's just a few days. I'll buy you something nice. But Ryder stood his ground. Because again, it's not about the money. It's not about a video game or some headphones. It's about not being voluntold into a role he never signed up for. And when Dad turned it personal, suggesting this was all about clinging to the past, about not letting go of his mom, Ryder fired back with brutal honesty. If there'd been enough room, maybe he would have stayed. Maybe things wouldn't be this bad. But now, it's not just about space. It's about expectation. It's about entitlement. Because this woman, this stepmother, doesn't just want him to be part of the family. She wants him to participate, babysit, smile, bond, pose for the family photos, play big brother to kids he barely knows. And she's furious he won't play along. She called him stubborn, said this was part of the deal. But what deal? Who made this agreement? Because the writer surely didn't. He never signed a contract that said, if my dad remarries, I'll automatically become a third parent to children I didn't choose, in a house I don't live in, under rules I never agreed to. And when he told her exactly that he made no deals, owes her nothing, and never agreed to be her summer babysitter, it lit a fire. She was pissed. Dad accused him of being rude for no reason. But here's the thing people forget. Just because someone wants your help doesn't mean they're entitled to it. So, is the writer the asshole? No. He's just the only person in this dynamic with the guts to draw boundaries and stick to them. He's not cruel, he's not disrespectful. He's just done sacrificing his peace for someone else's convenience. And let's be real, if the roles were reversed, if a teenage girl refused to give up her room or her summer to care for children she barely knows, no one would blink. But when a teenage boy does it, suddenly he's cold, rude, difficult. But the truth, he's just tired. Tired of being told to adjust, tired of pretending he's part of something that never really included him. Tired of being asked to play happy family when his own grief, identity, and comfort have been completely sidelined. So no, he's not the asshole. He's just done pretending. Am I the asshole for refusing to make lunch for my siblings and deciding I won't even make mine anymore? Let's talk about that slow, quiet rebellion. The kind that builds up, not with yelling, not with slamming doors, but with one very deliberate choice. No, I won't do it. That's exactly where this story begins. Not with drama, not with conflict, just with a 16-year-old, the writer, standing at the kitchen counter one morning, deciding he's had enough of school lunches that are soggy, flavorless, and barely pass as food. He makes a simple choice: start packing his own lunch, a self-taught rotation of decent, home-prepped meals. A tiny act of independence, maybe, but also a big deal for a teenager. And for once, he's doing something just for himself. At first, his parents seem proud. His dad in particular is impressed. After all, in a household where cooking isn't exactly a strong suit, watching your teen step up and take charge of their own meals, that's worth celebrating. But then, the shift happens. In April, out of nowhere, his mom brings a new expectation into the picture. She says, "Why don't you make lunch for your siblings too?" 3 younger siblings, 14, 13, and 11. The writer's response, a firm, unapologetic no. And here's where it all starts to unravel. It's not just about the sandwiches. It's not just about saving time in the mornings. This is about boundaries. You see, these siblings aren't just typical kids. They don't respect personal space. They walk into the writer's room without knocking. They take his things without asking. They treat him like a third parent, but without offering even the smallest shred of courtesy in return. And now he's being asked to do more? It's not hard to understand why he's resisting. His mom doesn't take kindly to his refusal. To her, this isn't about food anymore. It's about respect. She calls it a small ask, something he should do as the eldest. But from the writer's point of view, this is just another responsibility being dumped on his plate because it's convenient for her. She argues, she pleads, she pushes, the writer stands his ground. He doesn't scream, he doesn't throw a fit, he just says no. And that, somehow, is what earns him the title of spoiled. Now let's pause here. Why is it that in so many families, the oldest child is treated like a third parent? Expected to sacrifice, expected to help, expected to absorb the chaos of the household without complaint. And when they finally say enough is enough, they're suddenly the problem. The writer isn't being cruel. He's not refusing to help out ever. He's drawing a line in the sand. He's saying, I've worked hard to create something for myself. I've built a small, consistent routine that gives me a little peace in my day. Please don't take that away from me. But instead of hearing him out, his mom doubles down. When he refuses to prepare lunch for his siblings, she throws a new rule at him. If you're not going to make food for everyone, you can't use anything bought for the household. So what does the writer do? He gives up his lunch altogether. He's not bluffing, he's not threatening, he just lets go. He tells her, "Fine, I'll eat the school food again. I'm done." And that decision, that quiet surrender, it enrages her. Not because he's actually doing anything wrong, but because he didn't break under pressure. She calls him selfish, says she raised him better, twists the narrative into something it's not. And yet, in all of this, the writer's dad sees what's really going on. He steps in, defends his son, and tells his wife to stop piling on this guilt trip. But that only sparks another fight between two parents caught in a power struggle over who's right and who's soft. Let's be honest, this story isn't about packed lunches. It's about control, entitlement, and the unseen emotional labor we expect from teenagers, especially the oldest child, without ever acknowledging how much we're asking of them. It's the expectation that they will always give more, because that's just how it is. And the moment they push back, they're labeled ungrateful, spoiled, disrespectful. But here's the thing, the writer isn't being selfish. He's setting a boundary in a household where his siblings have been allowed to cross every single one without consequence. He's learned to stand up for himself, even when the people in power, the very people who should be protecting his autonomy, try to guilt him into silence, and that takes strength. So, is the writer the asshole for refusing to make lunch for his siblings and deciding to stop making his own? Absolutely not. He's not acting out. He's not punishing anyone. He's just tired of being used as a default parent and tired of being asked to give more than he's been given. This is not about a sandwich. It's about self-respect. And when a 16-year-old calmly tells the adults in his life, "No, I won't be manipulated into doing more than my fair share," we shouldn't shame him. We should listen. We should respect that boundary. Because the truth is, some kids grow up too fast. Some are forced to give so much that when they finally draw the line, it feels like betrayal. But it's not betrayal. It's balance. And in this story, the writer is doing the one thing he's never been taught to do: protect his peace. Am I the asshole for not shaving my legs before a date and making him uncomfortable? There are moments in dating where you expect the awkward, the fumbling conversations, the check dance, the nervous glances that say, "Do you like me as much as I like you?" But sometimes the awkward hits from somewhere deeper, somewhere quietly laced in expectations we didn't agree to, but are still somehow expected to follow. And that's exactly where the writer, a 26-year-old woman, found herself. Now, this wasn't a first date, which can often feel like a job interview in disguise. No, this was their second, a stage where the nerves begin to settle, where maybe, just maybe, you let a little more of your real self show. The writer picked out a mini dress, something fun, something flirty, something that made her feel good. But here's the part that sparked the entire storm. She didn't shave her legs. Not because she forgot, not because she was making a statement, but simply because she didn't feel like it. Her legs weren't dramatically hairy. Nothing out of the ordinary, just visible up close, the way body hair naturally is. And still, she went out, she laughed, she flirted. The date, by all accounts, was nice. Nothing stood out as uncomfortable. Nothing was said in the moment until after. That's when the text came through. Casual tone, emoji at the end. But the message? Oh, it landed with the weight of a hidden judgment. Next time, maybe smooth legs? That little comment unraveled something bigger, not just about grooming, but about autonomy. About the invisible contracts we're expected to uphold just to be dateable. The writer didn't explode, she didn't lash out, but she did pause. She sat with the feeling of being subtly called out for something as simple and human as not shaving. She wondered if she'd made a misstep. Her friend told her she should have shaved, because it's early dating, because appearances matter. Because apparently, being a woman means tailoring your body to someone else's comfort before you even know if they're worth your time. But here's the real question she's asking. Should she have to? She didn't ask him to trim his beard to a certain length, or shape his eyebrows, or style his hair a specific way. But he looked at her, liked her enough to go on a second date, and still felt comfortable telling her how her body should be presented. And that's not just a comment on leg hair, that's a comment on ownership. This isn't about rejecting grooming, it's about rejecting the assumption that she owes it to someone else, that her body from the very first few dates must already be curated for someone else's ideal. Let's be honest, shaving is a choice, a personal one, and if she had chosen to shave, that would have been fine. But choosing not to, that's equally valid. This wasn't a political protest or some dramatic gesture. It was one woman simply choosing comfort. But when even a second date carries the weight of expectation, when even existing in your natural state becomes a point of criticism, it reveals how deep these silent pressures really go. And yet, the writer didn't make a scene. She just asked herself, did I do something wrong by not shaving? Did I really make him uncomfortable? And now she turns to the internet, to strangers, with a simple question. Am I the asshole for not shaving my legs before a date and possibly making him uncomfortable? The answer? Let's sit with that discomfort for a second. No, she is not the asshole. She's a woman who showed up as herself, who wore what made her feel good, who smiled, connected, shared a moment, and then got judged for something so inherently human it borders on absurd. She didn't make him uncomfortable. His expectations did. And if a little body hair is enough to shake someone's comfort, then maybe the real question is, what exactly is he looking for? A girlfriend or a mannequin? The writer deserves someone who sees her not as a checklist of grooming habits, but as a whole, autonomous person. And if that person can't handle a second date without throwing passive-aggressive grooming requests into the mix, then maybe he's the one who needs to check himself. Am I the asshole for not giving my grandson another grandchild's birthday present as a prize? There's a kind of joy in finishing something that took years, not days, not weeks, but years. That kind of effort doesn't just produce a project, it creates a piece of your heart made real with sweat, patience, and time. And for the writer, that project was an old arcade machine, a worn relic from a different era, lovingly restored in the quiet of a garage. Now imagine the pride, the moment the screen lit up, the buttons clicked like new, and the past became playable again. It was meant to be shared, to laugh with his grandkids, to hand over a slice of nostalgia and see it through their younger eyes. And for a while, it worked. Last weekend, the writer had two of his grandkids over, Boris, age 11, and Doris, age 8. They were excited, full of energy, ready to test out the long-awaited arcade machine. The air in the garage was warm with competition and laughter as they took turns. A rare kind of moment, the kind families remember years down the line. Eventually, Boris did what many older siblings do. He won. He set a high score, a good one, and he was proud of it. But then, he pointed to something that had nothing to do with the game. A giant stuffed animal, bright, oversized, and very clearly not just some toy lying around. That stuffed animal wasn't his prize. It wasn't even part of the game. It was a gift, purchased and tucked away by the writer for his other grandson, Morris, who had a birthday coming up. Different parents, different household. The kind of careful, loving gift grandparents plan ahead for. A soft surprise meant to light up a 6-year-old's face. But Boris wanted it, and he wasn't just asking, he demanded it, declaring it should be his because he won the game. Because apparently, arcade victories come with plush spoils now. The writer calmly and clearly told Boris, this machine doesn't give out prizes. It's not a claw machine, it's a passion project. It's about fun, not reward. But those words, they didn't land. Boris ran toward the stuffed animal anyway. Now let's take a moment here, because this is where the parenting line blurs. This wasn't just a kid misbehaving, this is the boundaries, about teaching what's yours, what isn't, and that not everything we want is automatically ours for the taking. So the writer turned to Boris's mother, his own daughter Bessie, for support. Surely she'd help steer this moment, reinforce the lesson, but instead, she folded. She actually suggested giving Boris the stuffed animal. Just let him have it. Her solution? Buy a new one for Morris, as if gifts can just be duplicated, as if the effort, the money, and the meaning behind the present could be swapped out like a backup battery. But here's the kicker. These aren't just $10 plushies from a gas station rack. They're expensive. The kind of gift you plan for, not impulse buy again because one child decided they were owed something that wasn't theirs. The writer stood his ground. No, that toy was for Morris, and Boris, while welcome to play, was not entitled to steal a gift meant for someone else. And when Boris couldn't accept that, the writer banned him from the garage. Not forever, not harshly, but until Boris could learn to respect what isn't his. Actions have consequences, even for kids, especially for kids. And just like that, the tension deepened. Now Bessie's angry, not just in the moment, but days later, still simmering. She thinks her son was treated unfairly, that the writer, her father, should have just given in, that keeping firm boundaries somehow equals cruelty. But here's the real heart of it. What would have been learned if the writer gave in? That if you want something, just cry louder, grab it? That winning a game means you're entitled to other people's belongings? No, that's not how life works. And deeper still, this wasn't even about a toy. It was about the kind of person Boris is learning to be, and what kind of lessons the adults in his life are teaching him. Because at some point, someone has to say, this isn't yours, and that's okay. Not out of punishment, but out of love, out of a desire to raise children who understand limits, who understand value, not just in objects, but in effort, in respect, in relationships. The writer didn't shame Boris, he didn't yell. He simply removed access to the garage, a place of shared joy, until Boris could understand that joy only exists if we all treat each other's things with care. And now the writer's left wondering, am I the asshole for protecting a gift, for saying no to entitlement, for expecting my own child to back me up instead of tearing me down? Let's be honest here, if the roles were reversed, if Morris had shown up and grabbed something meant for Boris, how would Bessie react then? And yet, somehow, this grandfather is being painted as the villain for drawing a line in the sand and sticking to it. No, writer, you're not the asshole. You're a grandfather who spent years building something to bring joy. You bought a gift with intention. You asked for a little support and got guilt instead. But you held your ground, not out of spite, but out of principle. And one day, maybe not today, Boris might understand that the best gifts in life aren't won, they're given with meaning. Am I the asshole for not adding my longtime girlfriend to the deed of the house I bought us? The writer is 32 years old. A whole lifetime of sacrifice, planning, saving every penny possible, all to reach one of the biggest milestones anyone can dream of, owning a home. And not just any home, a $1 million home. This wasn't a frivolous impulse or a flashy flex. It was a dream come true, a dream built with the hope of a future with someone he loved. That someone is his girlfriend, whom he's been with for 3 years, long enough to share lives, routines, holidays, and probably even toothbrushes once or twice, but not yet long enough, it seems, to share ownership of the most important investment of his life. The writer footed the entire down payment himself. No joint fund, no financial help from her, nothing. He didn't resent her for it. He didn't throw it in her face. He just took responsibility. That's what partners do when they can. And because they weren't married yet, he made what seemed like the logical decision to put the house under his name for the time being. Simple, sensible, rational, at least to him. But then her family got involved, her sister, her mother. Suddenly, their opinions were echoing in the walls of this brand new home. If you don't add her to the deed, you don't trust her. You can't have a relationship without trust. It's one of those moments where lodges headfirst into emotion because the writer does trust her. He loves her. He bought this home with her in mind for her. This wasn't a bachelor pad or a just in case we break up investment. This was the place where he imagined building a life together. But now, that dream is getting chipped away, not by her, but by the voices in her ear. And here's where it really starts to hurt. She's beginning to listen to them. When they first bought the house, she never brought up being added to the deed. It wasn't a concern. She didn't contribute to the down payment, she didn't offer to co-sign the mortgage, and that was okay. It was an understanding, silent and mutual. Or so the writer thought. But now it's starting to feel like her love is being tied to paperwork. That trust is being measured in legal documentation. And that's devastating. What started as a dream home has turned into a battleground of what-ifs and accusations. And the question the writer is left with, the one gnawing at him more than anything else: should he add her to the deed just to make her family happy? Because the pressure is real. It's not just tension anymore, it's friction. It's straining their relationship. It's sowing doubt. It's making the woman he loves look at him differently, not because he changed, but because they planted the idea that maybe he doesn't trust her enough. And that's the tragedy here. This isn't about real estate anymore. It's about perception. It's about how easily outside voices can get inside a relationship and twist something pure into something conditional. Let's be honest, adding someone to the deed of $1 million home is huge. It's not just a romantic gesture. It's a legal one. It's binding, permanent. It means if the relationship ends, things could get ugly fast. It's not about love or lack thereof. It's about protection on both sides. Love doesn't require risking financial ruin to prove itself. If she had contributed to the down payment, or if they were already legally committed through marriage, it would be a different story. But right now, the writer is being asked to hand over half of a life-changing investment, not because it makes sense, but because her family doesn't like how it looks. And here's the irony. In their effort to demand trust, they've only bred mistrust. So, is the writer the asshole? Let's call it like it is. No. The writer made a smart, careful, and respectful decision. He didn't deceive her. He didn't shut her out. He's not using money as power. He simply did what many would do: protect his financial future until there's a shared legal bond. It's understandable that she might feel uneasy, especially with her family's influence. But feelings are not always facts. And if trust is truly the foundation, then her trust in him should matter just as much as his trust in her. This isn't a story of betrayal. This is a story of boundaries. And in a healthy relationship, those should be respected, not railroaded by guilt. So no, writer, you're not the asshole. But you may want to have a real, raw conversation with her. Not about demons, but about whether your relationship is just between the two of you, or if there will always be outside voices dictating what your love is supposed to look like. Because trust, it's not in a signature. It's in how you build together, one decision at a time. Am I the asshole for laughing at a British coworker for saying he's Republican? Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. And sometimes it's just straight up baffling. Let's take you into a quiet UK office, not a heated political battleground, not a campaign rally, not even a pub where folks argue over who should be prime minister. Just a standard workplace with ringing phones, awkward coffee chats, and that one coworker who always has a little too much to say. That's where our story starts. The writer, a 24-year-old woman, has been assigned a bit of a thankless task: retrain a coworker who hasn't been pulling his weight. We'll call him Bob. He's somewhere between 45 and 55, one of those people who's been around long enough to make you wonder how he still manages to fumble the basics. During a slow day, they're chatting, nothing serious, just small talk filling the silence. And then, completely unprompted, Bob drops the line, "I'm a Republican." Now remember, this isn't Kansas. It's not Ohio. We're not even talking about someone who recently moved across the pond. They are, both of them, very much British. Born, raised, and likely never even set foot on American soil. So yes, when Bob makes this bold declaration, the writer scoffs. And you know what? It's hard to blame her, because it wasn't just a one-off comment. This man has made his political identity loud and clear across the office multiple times, despite being thousands of miles removed from the very system he's claiming to be part of. The writer had heard it all before, not directed at her maybe, but from across desks in the break room, probably muttered during tea breaks. Bob's been championing a political party from a country he's never even visited, like it's part of his national duty. So when he says it to her directly for the first time, yeah, she laughs. Not out of cruelty, not to humiliate, but because what else can you do? Here's a man wearing a red hat in a British office, aligning himself with a political party tied not to his homeland, not to his ballot, not even to any real lived experience, but to the idea of something. A symbol, a persona, one that frankly he can't even explain. Because when the writer tries to dig deeper, asks who he voted for, what Republican policies he supports, how long he's felt this way, Bob has no real answers. He doesn't vote in the US elections. He's never donated. The best he can muster is that he agrees with one of the most controversial policies, which, let's be honest, is always a red flag. The writer laughs again, not at him exactly, but at the absurdity, the sheer on-brandness of this guy claiming a political identity based on a handful of talking points and an overglorified fantasy of American politics. And ever since, Bob's been sulking, wearing his little red hat, dragging his pride through the office corridors like it's a wounded dog. Now here's where things get complicated. Is it wrong to laugh when someone says something so bizarrely out of place? Maybe, maybe not, because this isn't about mocking someone's beliefs. The writer isn't ridiculing political ideology itself. She's reacting viscerally to a performance, to a man who's chosen to wear a label loudly and often without understanding the weight behind it. It's like someone saying they're a Jedi because they saw a couple of memes and liked the lightsabers. There's something performative about Bob's Republican identity. And the writer's laughter? It's not malicious. It's human. It's the reaction you have when someone says something so off-kilter, so mismatched to the context that it just falls out of your mouth before you can catch it. But Bob, he took it as a personal attack. Not because he was hurt by the laughter itself, but because that moment, that scoff, punctured whatever fantasy he'd been clinging to. Maybe he thought this identity made him interesting, bold. Maybe he imagined people seeing him as an outsider, a truth teller in a sea of British indifference. Instead, he got laughed at. And that sting, it lingers. But here's the thing. Humor is sometimes the only defense against absurdity. When someone spends their time grandstanding about foreign politics, parroting slogans from another country's culture war, and proudly aligning themselves with something they don't actually engage with, it's hard not to see the comedy in it, especially when it's being broadcast unsolicited across an entire office. The writer didn't attack his character. She didn't go after his values. She just couldn't keep a straight face. Is the writer the asshole for laughing at her British coworker who claimed to be Republican?
No.
Because there's a difference between mocking someone and reacting honestly to something that's, well, a bit ridiculous. Especially when that person has made it their mission to constantly perform that identity loudly and without nuance. The writer didn't corner him. She didn't shame him. She laughed. Because sometimes when people try too hard to be something they're not, that's the only sane response. And Bob, maybe it's time to hang up the red hat and ask himself, is this who I really am, or just who I want people to think I am? Because until you can answer that honestly, maybe save the politics for someone who's actually on the voting rolls. Am I the asshole for walking down the aisle with a groomsman even though my boyfriend didn't like it? It started with a text, just a casual message, the kind you send your partner without a second thought. The writer, a 19-year-old woman, was excited. Her friend was getting married, and she had the honor of being part of the ceremony as a bridesmaid. And in true 2025 fashion, her fur friend sent her a picture of the groomsman she'd be walking down the aisle with. It's part of that TikTok trend, pairing up bridal parties ahead of time, giving everyone a peek into who they'll be matched with for the ceremony. Sweet, right? Harmless? Just a bit of fun? Not according to her boyfriend. The moment she sent the photo, he zeroed in, not on the dress, not on the joy, not on the celebration, but on one detail. Are you going to link arms with him? And just like that, a simple bridal tradition suddenly became a battleground. He called it a respect thing, implied it was inappropriate, that linking arms with someone else, in a wedding aisle no less, was some kind of emotional betrayal, that it crossed a line. The writer pushed back, gently but firmly. She told him it's her friend's wedding, and if that's the setup the bride wants, then that's what she's going to do. It's tradition, it's common, it's not that deep. But suddenly it was that deep. What started as light wedding excitement turned into a tense exchange about boundaries, trust, and maybe more than anything, control. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. In a strange twist of emotional déjà vu, the writer's friend, also a bridesmaid, had a nearly identical experience. She showed her boyfriend the same kind of picture, and his reaction? Wow, you're walking down the aisle with him? That's beautiful. Might as well hold his hand too. sarcastic, loaded, jealous, almost like they'd rehearsed it. Oh, and yes, their boyfriends are friends, because of course they are. Now the writer is left wondering, is this normal? Is she missing something? Is she being inconsiderate for not seeing his side? Let's really sit with that. We're talking about walking down a literal aisle, not a candlelit dinner, not a romantic getaway, not an emotional affair. A public ceremony with witnesses, family, cameras, tears, laughter. A day not about her, not about the boyfriend, but about her friend. And yet, the focus has shifted from love and celebration to insecurity and power. Let's be real. It's okay to feel a little protective in a relationship. That happens. But what matters is what you do with that feeling. Do you voice it calmly and listen with trust? Or do you let it fester into passive-aggressive jabs and make your partner feel like they're doing something wrong for participating in a tradition? The writer's boyfriend made something innocent into something threatening, and that speaks volumes. There's also this unspoken pressure that comes with being a young woman in a relationship. This idea that you're supposed to shrink your joy, your opportunities, your social interactions to make sure a boyfriend doesn't feel disrespected. But why should respect come at the cost of basic freedom? Let's be clear, the writer isn't ditching her boyfriend to go flirt with some stranger. She's walking in a line for someone else's wedding because she was asked to. She's playing a small role in someone else's big day. If that's enough to cause a rift, maybe the problem isn't the walk down the aisle, maybe the problem is the relationship. And when we pull back and look at the other boyfriend's response, the sarcasm, the belittling tone, it becomes clear this isn't just about one guy being dramatic. It's a pattern, a group dynamic, a kind of toxic male bonding built on the foundation of insecurity disguised as loyalty. Because here's the truth. When people feel secure in themselves and in their relationship, they don't panic over an arm link at a wedding. They don't turn ceremonial steps into emotional landmines. They trust, they support, they focus on what matters. So, is the writer the asshole for not seeing his side? Absolutely not. She's not disrespecting her boyfriend. She's not crossing any line. She's honoring a friend's wedding and participating in a time-honored tradition that countless bridesmaids have done for generations. That's not selfish, it's human. Let's not normalize this level of control under the mask of respect. Let's stop equating jealousy with love. And let's start asking a different question. Why is your partner more worried about a symbolic aisle walk than he is about making you feel safe, supported, and celebrated? That's the real issue here, because the moment you feel guilty for simply being part of a friend's joy, that's when love starts looking a lot like possession. And the aisle? It shouldn't be a battlefield. Am I the asshole for my response to my ex-husband? There are stories that begin with love and end in quiet separation. This is not one of those stories. This one begins with scars. The writer, a mother of two boys, 12 and 9, has walked through a storm most people wouldn't survive. Years ago, she stood beside a man she thought would be her partner for life. But instead of support, she was met with emotional wreckage. He tore her down not just emotionally and verbally, but financially. An abuser in every sense of the word, cloaked in the title of husband. Their marriage ended, finally, in 2015. The divorce was finalized around the time their youngest son was born. But the final blow? This man, the father of both children, denied paternity of the younger one, even after a DNA test, even with the truth staring him in the face. Denial wasn't just a tactic, it was a weapon. And still the writer survived. She did what so many people trapped in abusive relationships dream of doing. She got out. And when the smoke cleared, the courts didn't just grant her freedom. They terminated his parental rights, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. Chronic homelessness, gambling, alcoholism. He was spiraling and the court agreed this man could not safely be a parent. And so it was done. The rights were terminated. A strict order was laid down. No contact. Years passed. The writer rebuilt. Piece by piece, scar by scar. But trauma doesn't fade easily, especially not when it's tattooed onto a child's heart. Her eldest, just a child during the worst of it, is still in therapy, still learning how to process the damage that man left behind. Then, Out of nowhere, he slithered back in. A simple text. Almost benign if you don't know the history. Hey, how are the boys? If they ever want to see their brothers, just let me know. I have them on my days off. And there it was. A message from the past. From Rumple Foreskin. Yes, that's what the writer saved his name in her phone. Because if you can't escape the pain, sometimes the only power you have left is to mock it. Now to the outside world, that text might look casual, polite even, but for someone who lost years of her life to this man's abuse, a message like that isn't simple. It's audacious. It's a boundary violation, wrapped in fake kindness. And the writer? She didn't explode. She didn't lash out. She simply told him the truth. If the boys wanted to see their half-brothers, she would go through their mother. A reasonable response, a boundary firmly drawn. But he didn't take it well. He snapped, called her rude, said she was uncalled for, claimed he'd done nothing to deserve that kind of treatment. Let's pause right there. Nothing to deserve it? Nothing, even after denying paternity of his own child? Nothing. After the emotional, verbal, and financial abuse? Nothing. After the trauma he etched into his son's mind so deeply that it still haunts him years later? No. That's not how this works. You don't get to break someone and then complain when they won't let you back in. The writer didn't rage. She didn't even curse. She gave a calm, neutral response and moved on. She blocked his number, again, because somehow it had gotten unblocked. And now the whispers begin, people telling her she should have ignored him. That blocking him was too much, that her response was too cold. But here's the thing. Why is it always the survivor who's expected to take the high road? Why is she the one being second-guessed for choosing peace? Why is she the one being painted as the problem for refusing to let a man who traumatized her family back into her life with a smile? This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about bitterness. This was about protection. Protection of her children. Protection of her peace. Protection of boundaries that were set by a court of law. Her eldest child is still healing, still unpacking the emotional wreckage of a father who didn't protect them, didn't show up, and when it mattered most, chose addiction and chaos over fatherhood. And now, after all this time, that man thinks he can stroll back in with a text and expect warmth? No, absolutely not. So, is the writer the asshole for how she responded? Not even close. She gave a civil response. She respected the court's boundary, and most importantly, she chose her children over the comfort of an abuser. That's not cruelty, that's not pettiness, that's parenting. Let's stop telling survivors to be sweeter to their abusers. Let's stop expecting politeness in response to trauma, because sometimes the kindest thing a mother can do is say no, and mean it.